Today we're talking to Emma Clarke Conway, who is Operations Manager with Polio Survivors Ireland. And we also have Mick Keegan, who is a polio sufferer. You're both very welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's
Thanks,
great,
Jim.
great to
Thank you.
talk to you. So Emma, I might start with you. You might tell us a bit about polio, what it is, a bit of the history about it, and what the symptoms are.
Sure. Polio is a disease that thankfully is eradicated from the Western world, including Ireland. But back in, I suppose, the 40s, 50s in Ireland, there were some epidemics. It's a communicable disease. The virus is transferred from contact with feces, or it's a it could be, it was quite, I suppose, what's the word? Contagious, sorry, the word escaped me there for a moment, and became quite a fearful thing, particularly for parents, because it tended to be transmitted from children to children in various ways. And so a lot of kids, it is a disease that mostly would have affected children, babies and young children, even though some adults would have also gotten it. And the symptoms varied from person to person, a little bit like our recent experiences with COVID, where somebody would have a very mild form of it. Like that with polio, you could have something that might present as a bit of a cold, or just there's possibly people who didn't even know they had it. But the people who were most extremely affected could have woken up and literally not been able to move, not been able to get out of bed, perhaps not even been able to breathe. It usually affected a limb, so it could have been your legs, your arms, or the breathing would be because it's affecting your chest muscles. And it would mean usually in those days what they did was children were taken from their families, brought to hospital where they were allowed to recover, and then eventually would have spent quite a long time in hospital in a lot of cases, undergoing rehabilitation and physiotherapy, hydrotherapy, and many surgical procedures to try and help them to regain use of whatever limbs were most affected. Some children ended up in iron lungs, and this was something that looked like a coffin that you would lie in, and it would help your muscles to breathe. It was a terrifying contraption, but it also saved a lot of lives. And you know, one of our late founding members of Polio Survivors Ireland, Jim Costello, he would have been the last man in Ireland in an iron lung. He still used one in Cherry Orchard Hospital up until his passing 2 years ago. So it's a horrible disease. It just, because it was such an unknown, again, you know, I think my generation certainly has more empathy in the sense of having seen what COVID could do to people, the way it would affect people differently. It helps you to kind of cast your mind back and realize what polio would have done to people 60 years ago, and just that unknowing as to whether you could be one of the lucky ones or somebody who was really severely impacted. And for many of the polio survivors, they went on to live very normal lives. They went to school, they went through education, they had jobs, they had families, businesses. You know, they weren't held back by whatever disability they were perhaps left with by polio. But in later life, then they were struck once again with post-polio syndrome and late effects of polio, which has caused them to have more issues down the line, which wouldn't have been expected. And I suppose that's where our organisation comes in. We were set up in 1993 by a group of polio survivors who were realising that symptoms were happening to people who had polio. Information was coming through from the States where they had discovered this, and eventually the WHO recognised it as an official neurological condition, post-polio syndrome. And what that presents as is new weakness, So muscle weakness where there wasn't any. It could be chronic fatigue and chronic pain, and difficulty swallowing as well, and a severe intolerance to cold. They're probably the main issues or problems that are associated with post-polio syndrome. And then for somebody with late effects, they could have kind of problems with where they've overcompensation because they use the good knee, and now the bad knee, the good knee then is wearing out because it was protecting the bad knee, things like that. So we were founded to try and help people who were being affected that way.
Very good. And because of the complexity of it, the diagnosis must have taken a while.
With polio itself, at the time, very often, I suppose it was one of those things that doctors just knew that's what it was. I don't think there was a blood test or anything like that for it that I'm aware of. And then with post-polio syndrome, it's mostly diagnosed by exclusion because, again, there isn't a laboratory test. So it's a tricky one because obviously as we age, we are more prone to other problems as well. So they have to look at all of that before they make a diagnosis. But I think for anyone who's had polio, and especially within our organisation, people sort of understand themselves, the problems that they're having, and understand that it can be attributed back to their original polio.
And what about the amount of sufferers? And I always wonder what the gender split is.
I think it's fairly even. Maybe I don't think it like polio wouldn't have appeared more in men than in women, or boys than girls. So, I think it's fairly even. Maybe there's slightly more women. So I don't know. That can be down to a number of reasons. Women maybe would be more inclined sometimes to join an organisation. That's not always the case either. Or they sometimes say women live longer than men. I don't know if that fact is true either, but no, I think it's quite even. I don't think we've noticed a variance when we've looked at figures like that. But there's over 1,000 people who are registered with us, and another couple of hundred registered through our polio register. And then we do believe there's as many as 5,000 people who are polio survivors living in Ireland.
Has polio disappeared in Ireland?
Well, the disease itself is no longer, because of vaccination, it has been eradicated, thank God. It is still endemic in countries like, I think it's Pakistan and Afghanistan, and they're still fighting there to try to win that war and to eradicate it. But in, I suppose, countries where there's conflicts, you're going to have a reduction in vaccination levels. So it's not gone, and we need to remember that, and we need to make sure that people still get their children vaccinated. That's really essential.
Do you think that immigration will bring it back here?
Well, our vaccination rates mean that, we would have herd immunity, and I don't think people are coming here who have active disease. I think people who are coming here, migrants that we would have, but many of them have become members of our organisation. There are definitely people coming here who have had polio in their countries of origin more recently than it was seen in Ireland, but they're well recovered from the active disease.
Okay, good.
But they do now have quite severe impacts from polio. Many of them would be more severely disabled because they didn't have the rehabilitation in their countries that we had here in Ireland, 50 or 60 years ago. So that's very notable, and we're trying to do what we can to help people like that who are struggling now with trying to get services, or trying to just to be able to remain independent and move around.
And what about the inoculation or vaccination? Vaccination is a new word. Is it still done? Are babies or children vaccinated?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, it has to still continue. If we stop vaccinating against polio, then we're opening ourselves up to polio returning. And it could be something like someone getting, like they had a case in London where the vaccination levels during COVID went down, And as a result, there was slightly less herd immunity, and it was picked up in the wastewater because someone had been vaccinated in another country with a different type of vaccination. And I think it was the oral as opposed to the other one. And so there's always a risk there. So we have to keep vaccinating. But the good news is that it is given to babies as part of their normal vaccination schedule. I want to say 6 in 1, but I don't. I feel like there's now about 12
Yeah.
in one at this stage. There's so many they get now, and it will always be there. Like, and that must continue.
Poor kids. And tell us, what's post-polio syndrome? You mentioned that a while ago.
Yeah, so that's a neurological condition. So people's neurons and what was originally damaged by polio is impacted. And later on in life, post-polio syndrome can affect them by causing them to become weak, muscle weakness maybe they haven't had before, very severe intolerance to cold. And Mick can speak about that because I know it's something he is struggling with. It's not like, especially again as we age, we tend to feel the cold a bit more, but this is on a whole different level, and it causes a lot of problems for people. They have to try and stay warm, and then if they can't move around very much, that can cause, exacerbate that problem as well. And swallowing is another issue. I mentioned, we, like, some of our members would have to have softer food because they can't manage some of the, normal sized bites of food would be a problem for them. And then fatigue and just losing your mobility, starting to have to use a wheelchair once again, maybe having not had to for, at all. So it's like it's like you're being hit twice, really, I think, by polio. You've the disease you had when you were a child, and then you're hit all over again as an adult, and it's a very cruel thing to happen to people, I think.
And then what about the late effects of polio? Is that self-explanatory?
Well, it is and it isn't. I suppose late effects of polio, so similar to post-polio syndrome, the intolerance to cold would be an issue. It often means that, arthritic changes might happen. You may have walked a certain way all your life to kind of compensate for the fact that you had a limp, or that one of your legs was shorter than the other, or your foot was smaller, and suddenly that becomes harder. There's wear and tear on the good joints, and that suddenly makes mobility difficult. And as a result, you might need more mobility aids, you might need calipers, you might need a wheelchair or mobility scooter to help you move around. So it's again, you're sort of, your body's been through so much, and it's that later impact then of trying to work really hard to not let that set you back all those years, and it comes back again. Yeah.
Very good. Mick, I might bring you in there if you don't mind, and you might tell us a bit about your first dealings with polio, if you remember them.
Well, I got polio when I was 7 months old.
Okay.
And I spent 3.5 years in Baldoyle Hospital, and that was doing physiotherapy and whatnot there to get me fit. Then I was taken out. Now, while I was in hospital, I first got polio, and I'm only learning this through speaking to my mother, because my parents never talked about polio, because at that time it was like having a mortal sin, if I could say it that way. I had polio, okay? But because I got upper body polio, okay, which affected my left-hand side and my breathing and whatnot, I was put into an iron lung. And I was there for a while. It's not, I have photographs, not of me in it, but of children roughly my age at the time in these small contraptions, you know, and it's not a nice thing to be in, let me tell you. And I think that's where I got the fear of being claustrophobic, is being stuck in one of these. But when I got out of that, then the whole routine was trying to build up the muscles in my chest and whatnot. I always had a weak left side because of the polio. And I was attending Our Lady's Hospital up till the time I was 15, just to physiotherapy to try and keep me, because what was happening is my right side was developing normal, but my left side was really lagging behind. You know, you could actually see, if I took off my short one, you could actually see the difference. So that's right up to I was 15. And then after that, I took stuff home and I started doing exercise at home, trying to build up the muscles. I never really built them up properly on my neck, on my shoulder, because with the polio, they were gone. The muscles had actually died off. And that's what polio does. It attacks whether it's the legs or the arms, your hands and whatnot, okay? It stopped the signal going down to your legs or your arm, where I got it, to tell the muscle, you know, to move back and forward. And as a result, it blocks it. As a result, the muscles die off. So I've no muscles in my left neck, shoulder, back and whatnot, right down to my elbow. It's gone. The only thing I have now is it's got a bit fatter with fat rather than muscle, you know?
Right.
So,
and tell us, what was growing up like then? Youth and playing sport and all that type of stuff. And
well, I did, but I tell you, my first thing when I got out of hospital, I don't remember much of it, but my parents had a party for me because we, you know, and I just tell you, I had a new brother and a new sister when I got out. That's how much is the gap, you know, and I am missing in early family photographs. I'm not there, you know. I do remember, just to show you how people were terrified of polio, where I lived in Dublin. I went across the road to play with a child my age in his front garden. And the mother came out and immediately turned around and told me to get out of the garden. I was not to come near them again. That was the fear of polio, right up until it started the vaccination. I think it was 62, the mass vaccination they did in the schools. And I remember that. I remember trying to get the sugar with the vaccination on it. And I remember the doctors were there, they had a bit. I look at, he says, give it to him, you won't get it again, like, you know. So I was happy to get the sugar lump, regardless of what was on top of it, you know. But growing up, I've always, as I said, I've always a weak left-hand side. But I did boxing.
Oh, good man.
I went in and did boxing, and see what's happened is with the weak chest from the polio, okay, and I was an asthmatic as well. I ended up, I remember doing a fight one evening, you know, we were sparring and I was getting involved and whatnot. And the following morning I woke up, I couldn't breathe. I was taken into hospital for 2 weeks. And my mother said, and the doctor said, don't do that anymore. And the same when I played football. I'd end up, and I can understand what my mother saying that, because I come from a large family. I'm the third eldest of 14 of us, you know? So, I mean, if I got myself, again, asthma attack, and because of the weak chest, lung and whatnot, I was always taken into hospital because they had to, you know, and at that stage I was in what they used to call an oxygen tent. You know, I don't know whether you ever seen them.
I did.
You know, and like that, I was right, you know. not playing football. I used to sneak around to the park a couple of times and hope none of my brothers and sisters would catch me, and I'd be playing football, you know. But as I got into my teens, like that, I was able to do an awful lot more and played an awful lot of football then. But polio never really went away from me because of the weak side. And I didn't realise at the time I was getting really bad headaches as well.
Right.
And it's only with the late effects of polio that I could understand, because with no muscles on the neck and that side, and as a kid used to run around, and what used to happen then is the muscles would cause pain in your head running up. Nobody could tell me what was wrong with me at the time. And as I said, it was only when I got the late effects of polio when I pointed out, listen, I get these headaches. What are they for? And said, look, you've no muscles there. You're overused the other side. That's where I get the headaches. And they were pretty bad headaches at the time. When I got the late effects of polio, I got it when I was 40. Didn't know what was wrong with me. I started losing weight. I got pain was really beginning to bug me on my left hand side. And a couple of times when the muscles that were supporting the neck used to pack up, I couldn't lift my head out of bed, off the bed. I mean, and there was sometimes I had to make sure somebody turned me so that I wouldn't lie facing the bed, otherwise I'd suffocated.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then it was just a matter of waiting for the thing to ease off and the muscles started to come back into play. And I mean, I was going to in and out of hospital for 8 years trying to find out what the hell is wrong with me, you know. And it wasn't until my wife said it to me. My grandparents and whatnot used to get a collection box, you know, for polio survivors, or I can't think of the name of it in there, but they used to put a few bob, and a guy used to come pick her up. You know, all went towards polio. And of course, when my grandmother died, the box came back to me, and my wife then, as I said, why don't you give them a ring? I says,
Very good.
It's not polio, but I did. I rang them and they put me in touch with Joan Bradley, who rang me back that evening and explained everything to me, what was wrong with me. And within a couple of weeks, I got an appointment to see the neurologist. And I was confirmed, yeah, you are getting it. And slowly as things went on, I had difficulty walking. I could never understand that. And I used to walk and then I'd have to stop.
Yeah.
And when you stop, you must have just, you know, rest. And, you know, anybody else, when they'd stop for rest, they'd come back and do another 10 or whatever.
Yeah.
Their muscles would be charged up, any lay person. But for me, when I sat down for a while and I got back up again, they wouldn't charge up as quick, and I only got a shorter distance. And then it got to the stage where, look, I can't walk anymore.
Yeah. And tell us where you are now.
Where I am now is, I'm using a wheelchair now for the last 20 years, but I still have I can still walk around. But I need a wheelchair when I'm out and about, simply because it reduces the pain. And as I said, helps me. I have my good right arm now, it's caused me grief. For the simple thing is, I've overused it, you know. And I was waiting. I've got it. I'm going to see a pain specialist in a couple of weeks' time, but I'm waiting 3 years for that appointment.
3
Earlier
years?
this year, yeah.
Wow.
See a pain. Earlier this year in June, I had to go down to my GP and say, look, if there's nothing done with this arm of mine, I'll end up having to get somebody to come in, bathe me, clothe me, whatever else, because my independence is gone. I won't be able to drive or anything like that. Now, he sent me away for MRI scan and whatnot. He came back, and I was in Kappa Hospital where I got injections into my shoulder to reduce the pain, which has reduced it now. I'm a bit more mobility with my right arm, but that'll only last for 3 months.
Yeah.
So to go to see the pain specialist now is to try and get something a little bit more permanent. To do that, I do take stuff of when you have delayed effects polio, it's nerve pain you get as well. I used to get, my legs used to run away from me. They'd never stop. So I take what's known as Lyrica, and that's ease that pain.
Very
where
good.
I can sleep, but I don't like taking them because the side effect of them is your brain gets very cloudy.
That's the problem, yeah.
And that's a side effect which I'm not too happy about. But at this present moment, I'm looking now to see can I get something else that won't give me brain fog. And as for the cold really gets me.
Right.
If the doors are open for a couple of minutes and a cold breeze in my legs and whatnot, I can never get the heat back in that leg until I put something hot, in there. And the same thing, I remember saying to my doctor, how the cold even affects my hand. It's like taking a package of frozen peas out, put in the dish, walking from the freezer to put it in the saucepan and back. The pain I get, it's like taking a lump of hot coal out of the fire and then throwing it back in again. And that's the way the cold affects my hands now as well.
But look,
so
I hope you get your pain medication sorted out very soon.
Well, that's what I'm hoping on.
Please, God. I have to come back to Emma, if you don't mind. You told us a bit about how Polio Survivors Ireland came into being. You might tell us a bit about the services you provide.
Sure. Yeah, of course. It varies, and I suppose the simple thing we do that I think really helps people is we provide a listening ear. So someone like Mick who's kind of not sure what's happening can ring up and get a little bit of validation for how they're feeling and what they're going through. Because as we like to say, we understand. And we have social support groups around the country if people want to meet up. And we have telephone support, which is a separate service for polio survivors ringing fellow polio survivors to have a chat maybe once a month or once every other month. And actually Mick is our national coordinator of that service. And makes sure that continues on, which is all run by volunteers. We also then help polio survivors by if they need calipers, if they need certain aids and appliances to assist with their mobility, rise to recliner chairs, stair lifts, different things that might make life a little bit better and easier for them, we can try and help with. We wouldn't we have some HSE funding, and then we fundraise as well to try to bridge gaps where people are struggling with the costs of things, or where the waiting lists are so long that, as Mick said, 3 years for him. There could be similar waiting lists around the country for people if they're looking for customized shoes. It just seems to depend. It's the postcode lottery. It depends where you live. So we help with various things like that. We also provide counselling. We provide occupational therapists and physiotherapists as well. And we provide a winter heating grant, which again is quite important because people will struggle with the high cost of heating. They have to keep the heat on nearly all year round just to avoid the cold setting in, which then leads to that severe pain that Mick would have mentioned. So they're all ways that we try to help. And I think we do what we can for people with a small staff, and we're a national organisation. We'll help anyone around the country as best we can. But there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of problems for people, and we're trying to advocate for them as well. We were in Leinster House there for World Polio Day around the 24th of October, and we spoke to politicians about the fact that very often when polio survivors retire, they're pushed onto the state pension, which means their disability is not taken into account for social welfare supports. And that's a huge issue. And they might also then be pushed into services that are not suitable for them because of their age. They're losing entitlement to certain payments and just suffering undue hardship. So we try to fight for that as well, and try to make sure there's a voice for them to be heard out there. And it's great to have opportunities like this, John, to talk about the different problems that there are, and for people to hear from Mick as a polio survivor about the day-to-day challenges, because there are many of them, and we want to do everything we can to make life easier for these people.
And the last thing, you might just give out your contact details in case there's somebody out there.
Absolutely. And look, don't hesitate to pick up the phone. There's always someone to talk to. Our number is 01889 8920, and we have a website which is polio.ie. So they can contact us either way, but the phone number is the most important way. And you know, we will always, if we can't answer the phone, we'll ring people back. But the number is 01889 8920.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for talking to us at Disability Matters, and the best of luck.